Welcome to Fear Coded, a podcast where we talk about media from the horror genre and take a queer reading of a single book, video game, film, or TV show to explore just how queer horror can be. And this episode, we're kicking off the podcast with an introduction, talking about the basics of the horror genre, who your hosts are, and queer theory. But before we get started introducing these heady concepts of horror and queer media reading, let's introduce ourselves. And I'll start with my friend and co-host, Tyler.
Hey everyone, I'm one of your co-hosts, Tyler. My pronouns are he, they, but I don't really care. Go with whatever, feels right for the day. So I live in Orlando with my partner, who streams on Twitch. We have a lovely little life together, in this, delightful, quote-unquote, state. I have a master's degree in English literature. Shout out to Florida Gulf Coast University. Go Eagles. And I am a super big tabletop gamer. Love D&D. Oh boy. Yeah, D&D is like the really big one. That's the one that all my friends play. Oh no. But I also have some other games that I enjoy as well. From there that I play and I run. Including a horror tabletop game called Mothership from Tuesday Night Games, which if you are really into Alien, I highly recommend checking out sometime.
So you're a big fan of Alien. How did you get into horror, Tyler?
So I watched Jurassic Park when I was way too young for it. I just remember my whole family was gathered together watching our CRT TV in this big entertainment center where the TV was this tiny little thing. Mm-hmm. And I hid behind my grandma and watched the scene where the T-Rex attacks the tour trucks. Mm-hmm. And from that point on, I was just like, oh boy, this has changed my brain chemistry forever.
Oh my gosh. Oh no.
My parents were super dismissive of horror growing up. Like if I ever asked a question about it, they were like, oh, I didn't watch it. That was too scary. Especially my mom. Who you've heard me reference a lot on David's Are You My Mother podcast when I was on for the Linda Belcher episode. She was kind of asking me why I would be interested in this stuff, and it kind of made horror seem forbidden, but I was a child of the internet, as the internet was becoming a really big thing, and I learned about horror media secretly, and it really kind of drew me in and made me more and more intrigued by it just because my parents said no.
This is incredible, Tyler, because we're obviously a group of queer people talking about media. And when people say, like, I looked up something secretly on the internet, that's not usually the topic that I'm used to queer people saying, oh, I was really looking up, like, Ghostface. So that's great. Okay, well, you talked about Jurassic Park, but do you have any, like, favorites from the horror genre?
Oh yeah, so Alien is my absolute favorite. Ridley Scott's classic. I think that was also the movie when I first started grad school that I was just like, oh yeah, there is a lot that can be read into horror media. And it was so impactful on me for that reason. But I also love classic slashers like Halloween, Scream, all of the really big ones. Things that I think are either codifying for that genre or are just have really interesting things to say about it. I'm really into those. And then I also love surreal horror, like the output from David Lynch. Hugely into Twin Peaks, but I also found Blue Velvet to be a movie that has stuck with me, as well as Mulholland Drive. I probably think about those movies once a week just because there's not only is there so much going on in both of those movies, but it's also so visually impactful. So yeah, those really had a big effect on me. But I think that's enough about me. Mary Lee, our wonderful other co-hosts, I'm going to throw it over to you.
Well, hi, I'm another one of your co-hosts. I'm Mary Lee. I use she, they pronouns. But, pretty much anything that's funniest in the moment, I think is a great way to go with. I'm Arrow Ace. I live here in Texas. But I also grew up in Florida, so that's a fun little common through line there. I like to crochet. I'm a big tabletop RPGer also, play Dungeons and Dragons. I'm currently running a Monster of the Week campaign, which is if you like horror and like playing tabletop games, I highly recommend. It's like you're living in your favorite episode of Buffy or Supernatural.
Cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Love that.
You know, I like to play games. I'm just your average person on the internet, basically.
And Marilee, how did you, average person on the internet, get into horror?
Well, I've always been deeply into ghost stories. I think that I maybe grew up in a haunted house, maybe had the look on David's face.
No, I don't like that. I don't like that at all. Marilee, why? No, ghosts follow you. I don't like that.
Well, so actually, this is a true actual fact about me. I am notably in my family the person that if there's something supernatural going on, you should go hang out by me because it will just stop.
Okay, I like that. I do like that part of it.
It's true, yeah. Like the one actual ghost thing I could ever say actually to my name that happened is when the first house I remember living on, we had a room that had like a lot of mirrors on the walls, and I was very, very young. I remember I was in that room, and I think I saw something behind me, and I went to turn around, and that's where that memory stops. Because I was very little, and for the rest of my life, whatever happened. No ghosts. I just don't notice them anymore. They're gone. I've closed the door in my brain.
Marilee, I had such a similar experience because my childhood bedroom had a closet that was just mirrored doors, and the bed was parallel to it. So I would fall asleep on my side, staring at my reflection in the mirror.
Oh, buddy. Can't
and
do
let
that.
me tell you, many unhappy evenings looking at that, especially when I was like, I don't know, like 11 years old, and someone told me about the Jersey Devil, which is only in the woods of New Jersey. And for some reason, I thought it's going to get me, and it's going to show up in the mirror, and it's going to eat my brains. Same thing with Bloody Mary.
Man.
Bloody Mary was pretty bad, too.
Yeah, no,
you have said it twice, and I'm calling no more on that name at all. I don't know if it Beetlejuice rules. I'm not sure how it works. I'm not into this. I don't need a woman coming to say hi who's not invited. Hello, no.
Okay, sure.
So, Marilee, you've always sort of been in the orbit of horror. Then it sounds like. How did you get into it as like a media to consume and enjoy? ?
Well, I don't know. I just I've always been like interested in that kind of stuff. Because I thought that, you know, that supernatural things seemed cool and terrifying. And so obviously it was a natural through line. I was at my first slumber party at like 13 and we watched a horror movie. And that was I was thrilled and terrified and really never went back. I also grew up in the internet age, so I wasn't on the Something Awful forums, but I was on YouTube and watched Marble Hornets when it was first coming out. So like
not Marble Hornets. Oh god.
Yes, Marble Hornets.
Oh, the throwback.
Oh yeah.
My goodness.
So it's always been a natural interest of mine.
That's so cool.
I mean, do you have, so you kind of mentioned like a lot of interest in like ghost stories and your own experiences. Do you have any like favorite horror media?
Well, I do for sure. You know, the Haunting, the 1960 film adaptation of The Haunting of Hill House was
Great
one of my
movie.
favorite movies for a really long time because I just love the show don't tell like way that they approached handling the ghosts. But I grew up in Florida, so I watch Jaws every summer.
No, Jaws is I'm sorry. Jaws is best watched from a landlocked state.
David, you have not lived until you watched Jaws like on a beach vacation.
Yeah,
I have watched Jaws in a pool, and I did not care for that. I'm definitely not going to watch it while at a beach with an incompetent mayor or governor.
Mayor.
Yeah, he's the mayor.
Don't worry. Maybe we'll do a Jaws episode. I don't know how queer that movie is. That shark is queer as hell, let me tell you.
Oh, no. Are you kidding me? The three men on the boat? Come on. They were all trying to date the sheriff.
You're absolutely right. I didn't even think about that. We're going to have to dig deeper into this. That's
Absolutely.
a future episode.
No, but
future episode.
You know, I love the Resident Evil franchise. I love lots of stuff. I will say I love things a lot of times, and you're just going to have to get over it because I have a huge heart that just wants every piece of media in it.
That's great. I love that.
David, it's your turn.
Well, hi everyone. I'm David. I use he/him pronouns. I have a background in social work, so unlike these folks, I don't come by media analysis naturally. I worked in public health, and now I'm a semi-retired novice game designer and podcaster. I do a little bit of grant writing and consultant work on the side. I live over here in Valencia, Spain. Sadly, I don't have the kind of cats that Marilee has.
Oh yeah, no, I was going to introduce my cats, Cowboy and Pirate. You just have to know that they're the cutest little guys in the world. And continue on.
They so are.
They're delightful little fluff balls, and I love them with all my heart now.
Yeah. I am like a whisper older than Tyler and Marilee, but to the point that like I saw Jurassic Park in the theaters. So when you were like I was too young to watch this, I was like, how's that possible? How is that possible, Tyler? How is that possible? Yeah, that's me.
David, how did you get into horror? Which I know
my two friends asked me to be on a podcast together. That's how I was dragged here, the way that a ghost drags you to something you don't want to go to.
I should have said get into in quotation marks, because I know you're not the biggest horror fan by nature.
Here's the deal, is I'm really scared of things. I'm scared of things. I don't like when things are scary. But I think these are really exciting stories that I missed a lot of because I was too scared to explore and be with them. And now I get two great, wonderful guides in my life who are going to expose me the way that I, as a therapist, expose people to their fears.
Exposure therapy.
Yay, it's not the best. The science is out. But you know what? It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to have a blast with you all. And I have engaged in horror media before, so it's not like it's brand new to me.
Well, do you have any favorites or things that are at least horror adjacent that you really responded to?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, Marilee talked about The Haunting. We rented that on VHS as kids, and so I do remember that film really well. I loved the Mike Flanagan, The Haunting, that was on Netflix.
Oh my God, it was so good.
It was good, and it was truly and honestly, if you could remove the ghosts from it, all you were doing was watching a great family drama, and it just had ghosts. So it was a little bit like I was watching This Is Us, except that like paranormal was everywhere.
It was a little bit more exciting.
Yeah, that's a way to look at it, Marilee. My blood was pumping. You were correct. Scary tall man. Why is he so tall? I have a lot of questions like that as we'll be going through things. Why are ghosts so tall? I think ghosts are probably the thing that I'm most afraid of. So as we explore things, Marilee and Tyler have sadly heard this too many times, but I really resonate with horror films where I feel like I could grab a bat and hit something. That's where I feel most confident. So Marilee, you talked about Resident Evil. That didn't resonate for me, but I loved Until Dawn. I thought it was
Until Dawn's
great game. Yeah, because you could hit things with bats. Like you were literally given that instruction with the controller.
Yeah.
And that's what I look for in a horror experience. All right, so the point of the podcast is for us to talk through a single piece of media that exists in this vast horror genre. But before we can really know what we're getting into here, especially a scaredy cat like me, I need some help here. Like, what is the horror genre? So, like, when we think about how we all got into this, what does horror mean to us? Let's spend a little bit of time talking about how we see the genre of horror.
So, I guess I'll go first. Horror as a genre to me is, oh boy, it's so hard, right? Because you just described it, David. It's this vast thing. It's like trying to find something difficult like that. But
right.
I think to me, it's like something that is meant to frighten you. It's meant to scare you. It's meant to get your heart rate up. But I think when people talk about horror, they kind of simplify it in their minds. And by simplify, I mean they don't take it very seriously, because that word genre gets attached to it a lot. Marilee, you had mentioned, in conversations before, just like how like awards shows don't properly recognize and respect like the horror output.
Yeah, no, I mean, everybody jokes that the Academy hates genre films, and horror is such a genre. Like, you'll have a couple that sneak through sometimes, like Get Out or Silence of the Lambs, which I would argue isn't really a horror film in a lot of ways. It's much more of a crime thriller.
But then also, like, don't thrillers go under the horror umbrella?
Do they? Sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't. It's all very tricky.
Exactly. And I think it's that makes it so difficult to, like, give a proper definition to it that isn't just something straight out of a dictionary.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, and Tyler, when you were sharing sort of your upbringing and how you first got, like, want of a better word, titillated into exploring more of the horror genre, you mentioned Jurassic Park, and like in 100 years I would never say that Jurassic Park is a horror movie until I start to take apart some of the scenes in my mind. And I think, God, the velociraptors stalk those kids like my boy Ghostface in Scream 2 going after Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Like, like that is shot for shot. That, why wouldn't I have thought that was a horror movie?
Exactly. I mean, Spielberg he's such a wonderful director, especially with Jurassic Park, because I mean, he's doing it at the same time as Schindler's List and everything else. So to see him be able to really kind of lock in and create such an iconic scene of these velociraptors stalking children. I mean, the fact that he's able to do that and it becomes a legacy, a thing that a lot of people in our generation hold up to, like, are reminded of, and think about whenever we think of Jurassic Park. I think it's so significant, and it is horrifying. I mean, children are in danger. And I think, to me, when we're also talking about, like, what does horror mean to me, I kind of go back to that scene, or I go back to the scene in Alien when Kane touches the egg and the facehugger pops out. It's these moments of an iconic visual and an emotion that goes along with it. It makes it feel very resonant to me. I've attached some sort of connection to it. And then the way my brain works is, if I see something that is really strong like that, and I develop some sort of connection to it, I'm like, I want to dig deeper into this. And so I start looking at Jurassic Park, or I start looking at Alien, and I'm just like, what does this have to say about the time it was made in, or the culture that made it, or why is this truly so effective? Why is the scene of the velociraptors stalking the children so effective? And I think it plays into things that kind of unite us as a human species, because fear is an evolutionary instinct, and so we form strong attachments to things that scare us because our lizard brain is just like, get away from that. But our human brain, our analytical brain, our brain that asks us to engage with art or media or just something that's interesting, clicks into that and is just like, I want to know more. I want to know why this is so effective. Why do I like this so much? And I think that it took a long way to get there, but I think that's actually what makes me enjoy horror so much, is because it is that sort of like intersection between like the lizard brain and the human brain trying to make something exciting from something that is meant to scare us.
That's really beautiful.
Thank you.
Marilee, do parts of that resonate with you? Do you feel like that sort of fits your definition of horror, or how you came into thinking about like what justifies a horror film?
Well, so the thing is, I can't use I know my sister, she thinks that anything is a horror film if it like raises your heart rate, and I can't use that as an example, because the most anxious I ever get, like when I'm watching something on TV, is when somebody is in a very embarrassing situation and they won't get their foot out of their mouth and stop it. I have like a huge physical reaction. I will have to leave the room sometimes.
I love this. Marilee pitching Bridesmaids as a horror film for us to cover on the podcast.
Don't do that to me.
I love that.
Yeah, there are a lot of comedians that I can't watch because like how other people view horror is that comedy is that to me.
Anything cringe is just like, get this away from me.
I can't do it. I can't watch The Office. But so to me, a horror is a narrative in whatever like medium it chooses to be that deliberately engages the audience in some way to have a reaction of terror or fear.
So Marilee, like, how do you kind of take that definition and then apply it to your own personal relationship to horror?
I think that a lot of the time horror stories are interesting because in that deliberation of telling this certain kind of story, you can find a lot of people who are interested in exploring what that means to deliberately evoke this very negative reaction in people in certain ways. And I just think that you can find a lot of interesting meat on a bone that a lot of people aren't interested in exploring.
Yeah, that resonates a lot with me too, Marilee, because when I think about what I can bring to this conversation that maybe is a little bit more nuanced than what you two have already shared, which is so brilliant. I love thinking about the way the brain develops and how the exercising of the amygdala to throw out these stress hormones is like cathartic for a lot of people, which is why people ride roller coasters or jump out of airplanes, like things that.
Okay,
like,
actually, hold on. Do you like roller coasters? Let's do a quick poll here.
No, absolutely not.
I do, actually.
I sometimes like roller coasters and sometimes don't, which this, I think, solidifies the fear index because sometimes I like them. It just really depends on a lot of different qualities. Yeah. Tyler, you're all in all the time, and David just doesn't like them. I think we've nailed it. We found the perfect litmus
scared
test.
of everything. Scared of everything. The thing is, and what's funny is that when a lot of people approach like fear of roller coasters, they'll say things like, "Oh, I don't think it's safe." I know for a fact that it is safe. I am very familiar with regulations that go into them. I actively don't like being scared, and I don't like the chemicals that are released from fear. Mm-hmm. I don't like them. Much like I don't like cilantro. Like I just don't care for it. It's not working for me. It's
Do you have the cilantro soap gene?
I do. I have the soap gene. So maybe it's related. You heard it here first. Evaluation study to come. Cilantro soap gene tied to not liking being scared.
Okay, well, you've just committed yourself now to every time if we have a guest in the future, we're going to have to ask them if they like roller coasters and cilantro.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that I felt like was a natural part of our scripting anyway. Don't you?
God, I love this.
Yeah,
but I think the thing that's like sort of lingering to me is that I do like and enjoy how this genre, both historically and in the present, is a space to give novels and stories and movies and television shows and video games the opportunity to visit the macabre, mm-hmm. And explore that in a way that other media doesn't allow them to in the same way. And so I think stories about death, I mean, when I was trying to like learn about the basics of things, I read a lot of works by Poe because of course, like you've heard of him, him, like Zinda the Raven and shit. And until you actually like read this, you're really just relying on like cultural references that have been made to you your entire life. You actually read them and you think that this is actually chilling, and not just because like, I don't think a raven's coming to get me. That is not among my fears. Birds are fine. I can hit them with bats, as I think I've explained.
But we shouldn't. We should not hit birds with bats.
We should not. Unless they're coming at you like Alfred Hitchcock bats.
The birds.
Should hit bats with bats. No. Don't hit anything. Don't hit anything living. Only spooky things. But I think that the poem, The Raven, it's bone chilling, mm-hmm. because it's macabre. It's death, it's loss, it's grief. And it's sort of this nagging, the emotional resonance that comes out of that is hitting the same sort of parts of my brain that I would hit if I was reading a romance or I was reading a thrilling tale of adventure. Mm-hmm. But it's hitting them for something that's a lot that we have classified as a society as a lot darker, mm-hmm. which is death and loss, and sort of wistful remembrance.
So I know that you've already touched on you're not a big fan of horror unless you can hit it with a bat.
Right.
But here you are on a podcast called Fear Coded with two people who are super into horror. Why did you do this to yourself? What?
I feel like it is my responsibility to remind you that there are things out in the world that can kill you, and you need to be armed to defend against them. No. The better answer, Tyler, is that I think that without sort of without an assignment, like I'm just never going to experience these things unless I like sort of get myself willing to experience them. And that's a shame because there's so much greatness that exists out here that unless I make an effort to do, I'm not going to experience. There are people who hate romantic comedies, and you are also missing out on art that has been made in the world. And I don't want to miss out on any art. There are scary paintings that I don't care for. And I, move on to like what art should be, which is horses. But listen, paintings should be men on horses pointing. That is art.
Okay, so what you're saying is the peak painting that something could be that's a horror painting would be a headless horseman on a spooky horse.
A spooky horse would be scary. I don't care for that. But I'll say, like, we were recently up in Oslo, we got to see The Scream by Munch, and it is actually a little scary to see. And this is an image that I have seen, I don't know, gang, like 200, 300, 400 times. Like it is one of those pieces of art that you're like, oh yeah, I know that. And then you're seeing it in person, and it is so much more evocative of this like ethereal horror that is existence. I had to go get an ice cream afterwards. Like it was just a lot.
It is a lot. And I'm glad you treated yourself to an ice cream.
I did.
David, I just posted The Nightmare, a painting by a lovely artist named Henry Fuseli. There is a horse in it. If you could guide me through your emotional reaction to this.
Yeah, let me describe the art for everyone who hasn't pulled it up on their phones. There is a curtain in the background. It is red. There is a woman who I'm going to say is the viewer insert. You're supposed to think of yourself as this woman. She's sort of fainted on a fainting couch, which is like goals. She's wearing all white. Sitting atop of her is an imp-like creature, maybe a goblin. And then peeking its head through the curtain is a very unnerving, very unfriendly horse with eyes that are white, almost to indicate that it is dead or undead. And the goblin is looking at the viewer almost to say that he is thinking about what to do with this passed out woman that he is sitting atop. And that is my interpretation of this art.
And your emotional reaction to it?
I do not. I am afraid of what has happened to this woman, and then a little jealous because I too would like to faint on a fainting couch.
Very true.
Yeah, I think all of us feel that way, right?
Right.
100%. If I could have a fainting couch, I would faint on it every day.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that maybe binds us all together as queer people, is our desire to pass out on a fainting couch in a very dramatic fashion.
She's doing it. She's rocking it. Yeah. Listen. And if I could have a little goblin sit on me too, like that would also be fine. The
if
horse
he could like
is the
sit on my
back,
that would take care of so many of my problems.
Just do it a little massage.
Yeah. Do like with his little goblin feet, just kind of like walking up and down my back.
I like that that's the thesis. Queer people want one thing, and it's a fainting couch that they can faint upon.
Yeah.
Yes. Roller coasters, cilantro, these issues divide us. Fainting couches.
They are what will truly unite us. But I guess queer people, well, first of all, we're all queer. We're all, we are. We're definitely not straight here.
No.
Goodness, no. And here we are talking about horror. And this is kind of anecdotal, but I feel like many fans of the horror genre tend to be queer. And
I've noticed that too, Tyler. And I guess that was one of the questions I had for the two of you, because you're horror fans. Like, why is that? Why are we as queer people so drawn to this?
This is going to sound like a non sequitur, but I promise it makes sense. Are either of you guys familiar with the television show Black Sails?
I'm not.
I am.
Okay, so I'm gonna just real quick, a lot of spoilers for Black Sails. So it's a really good show. If you want to go into it unspoiled, now is the time. Go watch all 5 seasons and come back.
Oh my gosh.
But you must come back, please. It's very important that you come back to our first episode.
A big reveal is that Captain James Flint, who is this very important character in the show, is a gay man. And like his whole thing is that he became a pirate is because he wants revenge on England for a lot of things. But in part because of the way that they like demonize and victimize him and this man that he loved. And he has this whole monologue about how in the dark it's beautiful and you can find and explore things that people in the light just won't accept or appreciate in any way. And Black Sails is not a horror film or show or anything like that. It's a genre, sure, but I think it's a very similar kind of sentiment, I find, for the reason why people who are queer do like horror is because there's exploration and beauty in the dark.
I think that's a wonderful way
I jive on that
to like kind of describe that. I think there's also something cathartic about it as well. That kind of comes from that, and this feeling of identifying with many different roles in that piece of media. If we were to take something like Dracula, in the original Bram Stoker's Dracula, the novel, Dracula is kind of portrayed as being not exactly cis male, but he's not cis female. And it's meant to conjure up a feeling of horror because, well, if he's not one of these two things to my Victorian brain, what is he? He's not classifiable. Therefore, he's a monster. Yeah. And in the movies, we see a lot of that kind of going back and forth between, like, Dracula's very human, but he's a monster, or Dracula is very monstrous with elements of humanity, or none. And I think that kind of through line of here he is, and he is kind of queer. He's very interested. He has like a little male servant that follows him around. Not saying that all queer people have little servants that follow them around, although maybe we should. That would make my life a lot easier if I had a little servant. But just like he has someone that is very almost romantically obsessed with him, that is under his lure, but he's also trying to get with victims of all gender types. In the case of the original novel, his first victim is Jonathan Harker. Then he turns his attention to Lucy, and it's just kind of like an equal opportunity thing. And I guess if we were to like really look at that from a queer perspective, don't we kind of feel that way too sometimes? That we do feel like we don't really fit in one space. Yeah. And I think creating our own space is what allows us to be ourselves and find that beauty, just like you were saying, Marilee, about the light and the dark. Here we are, we're creating that space in the dark, and sure, it might seem scary or it might seem monstrous, but at the end of the day, it's for us, and it's for us to decide these things.
I do also think that the importance of the Hays Code in early film history cannot be overstated. Because for a really long time, characters couldn't be visibly queer without them being punished in some way. And so it kind of became, in a lot of cases, like shorthand for like, this person's a bad guy, to give them, queer coding. So for a long time, being bad or villainous was the only way that queer people could see themselves identified in the film and television that people were watching. And so, of course, there's a little bit of like a reclamation there as well, where you're going to call me a monster, I'll be a fucking monster,
Yeah. I totally agree with that. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think that even if we get into like slashers and things, like the idea of fighting or claiming space that's been withdrawn from you has a little bit of resonance for queer audiences, because if the rules don't apply to me, to Marilee's point, like I'll just make my own rules.
And I think that's such a wonderful point too to bring up, that we are both the monster and fighting the monster. We resonate, I think, very frequently, and when I say we, I mean queer people generally tend to resonate with the final girl or the final survivor in a lot of horror movies, because we kind of identify with, we're in a very hostile situation. We're trying our best to survive. We're going to fight like hell to do it. So I think that's an also important thing to bring up, and it kind of it resonates. It's cathartic, and I think horror for queer people is catharsis.
Yeah, in a lot of cases, for sure.
Well, I think that's actually a really good segue for us to talk a little bit about queer theory, but to put an end cap on the idea of the definition of horror, I might say that we can paraphrase a little bit from Supreme Court Justice Stewart, who, when ruling about pornography, said, "I shall not attempt to define this kind of material, but I know it when I see it."
Mhm.
And so it sounds like, in a little bit of a way, part of this is the eye of the beholder. So you, the audience, our little ghosts and ghosties listening, might say, "I can't believe they're covering that," but I imagine that if you listen to the episode, you'll see just why it made the cut as something horror for us to talk about with a queer lens.
Mm-hmm.
So, speaking of that queer lens, let's talk a little bit about queer theory. So, something that we all kind of discussed when we were first establishing this podcast is what makes us different from other horror podcasts. And first of all, we said, well, we're all queer. Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
But of course, there's other podcasts and other shows and think pieces and everything else that talk about, like, okay, well, I'm queer and I'm watching a horror movie. How does this relate to queerness? And I think that's part of what we want to do, but the way that we're doing it is a little bit more, I'm going to say a scary word, academic. But please do not
let my shield.
Please do
this
not.
This is my shield, Tyler, because we're going to watch this stuff and I can excuse myself into academia, which will protect me from the things like, if I can't hit it with a bat, I at least need to read about it in a book.
There we go.
Yeah.
So, and I think academia a lot of times gets a bad rap from people of all sorts, including other academics, because it's seen as very impenetrable and difficult and highfalutin and them lives with their college degrees. Go make coffee for me, you humanities major. But I think that's not the case. And I think queer theory is actually very approachable and comprehensible to everyone as long as we are willing to learn. And so I'll start off with a definition. Jonathan Culler called queer theory a branch of gender and feminist studies that grew in reaction to society's perceived stance of a heterosexual norm. It came about in the 1990s during a time when queer rights were demanded in the fallout from the AIDS crisis. And the idea of calling it queer theory, or specifically queer, is in a sense a reaction to homophobic insults. We're taking that word and turning it back as a badge of honor, which I think is something that queer people, especially queer people who describe themselves as queer, do very intentionally.
Yeah, and there's folks of a certain age who really grew up in a time when queer was used exclusively as an insult and you didn't have this reclamation. And I share your generation if that's you as a listener. And just know that, like, if this is a challenge for you, we totally get it. It's an identity that we all share, and this is a theory that we're definitely going to be using for this podcast. I hope that doesn't, upset or put anyone off, but there is a language is a changing and evolving world. And it's, if that's something that you're actively going through, just know that you're not alone. I went through it too.
Yeah. And I did as well. And I feel like it's something that people on the LGBTQ plus spectrum, we all relate to that feeling. And I think by calling it queer theory, it's our way of saying, no, this is our thing. This is for us. And this is who we are. And I think especially in 2024, when this podcast is being recorded, Marilee and I are both in pretty conservative states, and David has escaped to Spain, but
I have.
We're very
really went to one of the most protected countries in the world.
We're very, to us Americans still here, we're very much aware of our place in the broader society. And I think being able to drape ourselves in this shield of calling ourselves queer helps kind of protect us and it unites us as a community. And I personally really enjoy using that word to describe myself. Yeah. And here it is being used to describe this academic theory that came about during one of the most fraught times in the history of LGBTQ plus people. But speaking of that kind of like, when did it start? Queer theory itself traces its roots back to the philosopher Michel Foucault, who argue that sexuality is a social construct. We only really started calling things quote unquote queer when heterosexuality was recognized as the dominant ideology. And for me, I have a medieval literature background. I am a very strong proponent of saying that if you were to provide like a queer theory to something from that long ago, it's honestly kind of difficult because that concept of sexuality just wasn't a thing. And if we try and take a modern term and apply it to the distant past, it gets very tricky. So not to say that there were no gay people in the medieval times or earlier or anything like that, but that's also our modern perception of, hey, we came up with this rule of like, this is what it means to be gay. This is what it means to be queer. And we're trying to apply it to a time where that just wasn't a thing. Same thing with feminist like theory. It's kind of difficult to do that. When I was in grad school, I used the term proto-feminist quite a bit because I think it more adequately described. So if you want to say it was like proto-queer to describe something from the ancient past, then that's okay. And I think that's kind of what, to me, Foucault is talking about. He's saying like we only really come up with words and labels for signs when that sign is now being constructed by the dominant ideology. And so if we don't belong to that dominant ideology, we're out. And now this is our way of trying to claim that.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, it totally makes sense.
Yep. And so I just mentioned feminist theory. Judith Butler and other feminist theorists are recognized as pioneers of queer theory. Again, Judith Butler, she's a wonderful philosopher. I highly recommend looking at her works. And then another academic, Frederick Green, said when trying to break down what queer theory as a label means is, quote unquote, queer theory as a label for a new critical reading practice means at least three different things. 1, queer theory as a theory of the queer, the odd, the abnormal, and a theory privileging that perspective or experience. 2, it means queer theory understood as a queer, different, or atypical kind of theory. And 3, queer theory, where queer operates as an imperative to queer or defamiliarized theory, make its assumptions and inclusions subject to analysis. All that being said, queer theory is meant to take theory that has been previously established by the dominant ideology of heterosexuality, and now we're saying, okay, we're going to get our greedy mitts on it and look at it from this different LGBTQ or anything that's non-straight angle.
Right. So like just putting like pen to paper, because that's the, with theory, one of the things that we do is we understand it, we get a sense of it, then we apply it. And so when we think about how we're going to apply this lens of queer theory to our discussions around horror films, what does that end up looking like to each of you or each of us?
So to me, I think applying queer theory to horror means that we're looking at horror that has been established in this ideological space of heterosexuality. And we're saying, okay, but what is it actually trying to communicate from a queer perspective? And I think some people might get held up by that because they think like, okay, well, all horror movies or all movies are made in this space. And not just movies, but all media is made in this space where the dominant ideology is heterosexuality. Right. How can anything be queer in that case, unless the director themselves is queer? And to that I say, I mean, hello, like queer culture has been around and queer people have been around forever. And people have always been like conversing with queer people. It's not like you grew up on an island and that's where all of your media comes from. And then you go out into the world and it's just like, okay, I guess this isn't political in any way. Our views and the products that we create, and I hate to say products because that sounds really like capitalist, but I'm going to say like the media that we create itself is made from our reflections from culture and how we are impacted by culture. And that includes people who don't fit into that dominant ideology. And so it doesn't just have to be a queer person, although extremely valuable, and we will be talking about queer creators as this podcast goes, but instead movies like Alien. I go back to Alien a lot because again, that's my favorite movie, but Alien is a really good representation of this. Alien was directed by Ridley Scott, and it was written by Dan O'Bannon, who are, I assume, all heterosexuals. And yet you look into it, and there's so much in there that does not fit with this typical heterosexual ideology of like man and women have sex, create baby. Alien is about upsetting that. Alien is about, what if a male identified person was impregnated? What kind of creation comes from that? And I think nowadays, obviously, we do not apply horror to that because trans people exist and trans people matter and they should be protected, and gender itself is much more complicated, and we recognize that more so than we did in 1979 when Alien was made. But it's still that initial idea of like the natural order according to heterosexual culture is upset by this balance. And what does that have to say? What is trying to be communicated? And I think when you look at it from that perspective, it opens your eyes to so much more. There's video games that are full of really boss, like, tough guys that have queer undercurrents in them. There's podcasts, there's books that are written by straight people, and yet there are queer characters or people that are queer coded within those things, because media is formed by the culture that it's created in and by the person it's created by. And that can be a response to heterosexuality, that could be pro-heterosexuality, but something has been wronged in some way. The natural order has been upset. It could even be like Mara Lee, like you said earlier in the podcast about Jaws. That's 3 dudes on a boat, and they all want to get with the sheriff. You know, it's interesting how we can take that and view things in different ways, even stuff that seems very firmly established in film canon as like there is nothing more to know about it. Queer theory allows us to dig into it and see like, maybe there is.
Yeah. The thing is, for me, I think that it's very important when looking at like queer theory in general, but like queer theory in horror specifically, is that in a lot of ways you can make any media analysis, in my opinion, more interesting if you look at it through different lenses. And queer theory is just another one of those lenses. And I think that you can find a lot of really interesting material specifically under and using a queer lens, because there are a lot of things that people just don't say in like a like cis-centric heteronormative culture, that if you like even peel down just a little bit, you can find a lot of more, like there are a lot of really tough action guy movies that I wouldn't say are horror at all, that I think are infinitely more interesting if you look at it as potentially queer in some way, like the Fast and Furious franchise or Top Gun. All of these things are way more interesting to look at if you look at them through a queer lens. But with horror specifically, I think it's vitally important to remember that queer people have always been expressing our anxieties and fears using horror specifically. Like we talked about Dracula a bunch in this episode. Bram Stoker himself has been thought of as a gay man by a lot of people for a long time. And like we obviously, it's difficult to apply our modern understanding of sexuality onto people of the past. But if you think about how Dracula was written maybe by a gay person, I think that a lot of the interactions between specifically Dracula and Jonathan Harker or Renfield have a lot more depth and interest. And I'm always going to try and find an interesting way to like explore certain stuff so I can look through it with this facet or this way and see what can be found.
Yeah. I think what thrills me about this approach is that we also get to consider an audience sort of irrelevant to their author. So why do sometimes people glom and get magnetized over to these stories that may not have ever been for them or may not have even had them in mind, and yet we find them like moths to a light, also afraid of moths. Just as a heads up, just in
How
case.
are you afraid of moths? Are you a
David,
sweater?
David, they don't
they're
have
like, I am.
mouths. They can't bite you.
It doesn't. No, they eat fabric. I don't know. It is. I am a sweater. I am actually a sentient sweater.
Okay.
It's one thing I share in common with David Rose. Nothing else. I'm afraid of moths. You, David. But I think it's just fascinating the way that we all, as a community, as individual groups, find these things in glom on. I mean, Alien's one of them. Dracula's one of them. Like, we just find it. We resonate with it. I think we can even get into horror comedy. Like, if we were talking about the Addams Family, there is a lot of queer representation in a family that acts very normal but is very different, that is necessary. And taking a beat just to talk about this with my two good friends is so exciting and thrilling to me. And so I'm stoked to have this model as a way for us to do that. But I will make everything queer. I mean, I just will. We're going to do it.
We're going to get our dirty queer fingers all over everyone's favorite piece of horror media. That's our mission.
Because Tyler was like, the queerness of Alien is the alien coming out of the belly, and I say the queerness is Ian Holm, baby. It's an android.
It's wonderful. I am so excited for what we can talk about in this podcast. I think this is going to be a really fun time. I'm very excited to dig into movies that people never would have thought of as being queer, having queer stuff in them.
Yeah.
And we're going to do a great job, friends. So if you're listening to the podcast and you're worried, I don't have time to watch all these movies or these TV shows or play video games or, heaven forbid, read a book, don't worry. We're going to make sure that you're aware of all of the high points as we talk things through by doing a brief synopsis of the material so that nothing's a surprise for you as our listeners.
Which I know is actually really helpful. I know I have a friend who refuses to actually watch a lot of horror movies, but will listen to people talk about it or describe the plot. And if that's you, baby, we got you.
We got you, girl.
Yeah. I will protect you. You, listener, please write to me, David, and I will protect you.
David will send a bat to every person who writes into this podcast.
Don't make that promise.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. For legal reasons, that is a joke.
I'm gonna get a bat. I'm gonna get a bat though. I'm gonna get a bat with a logo on it.
There you go.
Well, then,
like, hold on.
Listen. What's our 1 year show gift? I'm saying it now, putting it out into the airwaves.
Perfect.
Everyone needs a bat for baseball, not for home defense.
Unless a zombie shows up and then
zombie, okay. Ghost, you're screwed. That's the problem with Mike Flanagan ghosts. They're tall.
They're so tall.
And why so tall? Well, we're going to be talking about more about that very soon, though. So Flanagan heads, don't worry, it's coming. But for now, is there anything else that we haven't talked about with the definition of horror, queer theory, or who we are as people?
I'm a Gemini, so
I'm a Virgo.
I'm a Cancer.
Hey, Cancer moon. Come on now. Oh, excuse me. No, sorry. I'm in Cancer rising, which I hate saying. Capricorn moon.
I am a Virgo sun, Aquarius rising, Leo moon.
Ooh, interesting. That's a fun mix.
I know.
Every time there's a Twitter meme about this, I have to look it up. I can never remember who I am. I was Regina George for something.
Well, that's fun. Being Regina George is never going to be a hardship.
Okay, I wonder if we could talk about Mean Girls as a horror movie. Like, the horrors of puberty are pretty bad.
They're a lot. And also,
listen,
as someone who was a teenage girl, kind of, it's not fun.
Yeah. And hey, every male actor in that movie was gay. So just so you know, there's your queer reading. Wow. Well, we did it, friends. Congratulations. We got the introduction done. We're so excited to jump into some other episodes for you all. But I just want to do a couple plugs on the outro. I mentioned it at the beginning, but I have a couple other podcasts that I do. So if you're interested in hearing me some more and talking about weird media, weird television episodes, I do that with my friend Derek on a podcast called Gimmicks. And then we're on hiatus for the summer, but Are You My Mother is a podcast that I do with my friends like Tyler, and I'll have Marilee on soon to talk about mothers in media and the way in which we write those characters. And that conversation is pretty queer as well.
Can't help it.
Yeah, it just is. Mother. Hello.
Yeah,
Mother.
Exactly.
She's mothering.
This podcast is a proud part of the Glitterjaw Queer Podcast Collective. If you'd like to listen to more queer media podcasts, you can check out the full roster of shows at glitterjaw.com. And we look forward to seeing all you ghosts and ghosties next episode, where he wears a hat, he's tall and black, but that's just how they describe him in his book. That's right, we're talking the Babadook.
Duk, duk, duk.
See y'all then. It's happening. I can't stop it.
Get the bat.
Okay, bye!
Bye!